Hey guys, I wanted to share my experience going from a menstrual cup to pads and now reusable pads. Now, before I started using menstrual cups, I was a pretty avid tampon user from my late teens up until I want to say around 26. I think around maybe like 25 or 26 is when I decided to try out menstrual cups. And I absolutely love them. I love the ability to only have to change this out twice a day. And I think the main reason why I decided to change from tampons to menstrual cups was because they were a more sustainable option. They were reusable. You only had to buy one, and ideally, they could last you up to 10 or so years. So for those years that I was using a cup, I didn't really find much of an issue. I did get some more cramping, especially when I had to take out the cups to change it out. I did experience a little bit more cramping that is my normal, but other than that, like I didn't really have much of an issue. Now, actually, through using a cup was how I found out that my uterus is a little bit tilted. So it's a little bit tilted to the left. So whenever I had to insert the cup, I had to position it so just like a little off center for it to like be sat in place correctly. Now, fast forward about 5 years, and I'm now like in my late 20s or so, and I decided to get some pelvic floor massages just to see if I can like untilt my uterus because it is bad for the pelvic floor. Because if you think about it, if your uterus is like shifted and it's kind of like pinched, then that would mean that there will be more cramping, more likelihood of spotting, just because it's getting harder for the uterine lining to be able to be shed effectively because it's in a awkward yoga position. And while talking to my pelvic floor therapist, she recommended I switch from using cups to pads. Now, the reason for that is because when you do take out a menstrual cup, you do have to break suction and then pull it out. But even when you're pulling it out, the surrounding muscles around it do get tugged a little bit. And she said, while we're working on realigning the uterus, then we need to also make sure that there's nothing underneath tugging it in any specific direction. So she recommended that. I was open to it. I didn't mind. Now, at this point, I really hadn't used pads and from I want to say I used them in my first couple of years of bleeding, so probably in my very early teens, so think 12, 13, 14, and I didn't really enjoy it that much, and also it was kind of stigmatized as being gross or icky or what have you. But now, as a menstrual health educator, I was a lot more open to the idea and experience because it is something that I didn't really think of changing my menstrual product because I feel like once you have a menstrual product, you just kind of use that menstrual product up until you either get like externally influenced to try something else. Now, because sustainability is still something that is really big for me, I wanted to find something that was still going to be reusable. But I was looking at different reusable pads and they were a little expensive, so I didn't use them just yet. I decided to go to Cora, I believe was the brand that I decided to use their pads for a little bit, and it was interesting. It was different for sure. I mean, especially when you go from using a menstrual cup, which is all internal, you don't really see much blood per se. It's except whenever when you're switching it out and then you're like, okay, yeah, I bled this amount, or it looks a little bit more clumpy than usual, or the color is definitely different. Those are a couple of the distinctions you can notice, but that's kind of it. But the Cora pads were okay. I did notice that I was able to gauge how much more I was bleeding, especially if it came to bleeding heavier in the morning than at night. So that was interesting. And then what I did notice though is that I was cramping a lot less, especially around day one, where I would usually experience a little bit more cramps when I had to switch out the cup. And because it was moving or impeding the surrounding muscles around it, it would cause more cramping. That really wasn't the case with the pads, so that was a good benefit there. So I did use about like a box or so, and then I found Hannah pads, which are the ones that I've been using so far. Now, the reason I went with Hannah pads, not a sponsor by the way, I just really like the design. They're super freaking cute and they look really well made. Now, they are a little bit more on the expensive side. I think all reusable pads are, especially when you're thinking of like how many you're going to need. So what I ended up getting is three regular pads. So this is what the regular pads look like, and then three of the liner pads. I think that would have been enough for me. Well, at least as like a starter set. But yeah, reusable pads are a little bit more expensive. I will say that up front. But the good thing with Hannah pads is that they do have regular sales where it's like buy one, get one 50% off, which is why I was able to buy the regular set and then the liners. Now, some of my initial thoughts is that they are super freaking soft. I don't know if we'll be able to like see the material on camera, but they are super soft. Even my partner was just like, I'm a little bit jealous that you get to wear these because he like felt them and he's just like, wow, I would love this on me. They have really good buttons that clasp the underwear, so I feel like they don't really move, and it might be even tricky to like shift them in a specific direction. Like if you need them to move, you have to like really, really work to get them to like shift in the underwear. No, I did have someone mention that the buttons are so strong that the ones that they had ripped around the buttons because she was pulling from like the fabric itself and the fabric ripped. So one of my recommendations, it hasn't happened to me, but one of the recommendations is to very, very gently make sure that you are like clasping the buttons when you do pull them apart. But yeah, the design is really cool. I really enjoy these little like star or like flower imprints that are on them to like help them not move around as much. So far, I've used them for about 2 cycles, and what I can say as they work really well, they are very absorbent. I haven't had an issue with them overflowing or leaking or anything like that. And the really great part about them is that they don't feel moist or they don't feel any type of like wetness when I do use them. I use them for, I want to say about like 4 to 5 hours on like a regular flow day, which I think is one of the main drawbacks that people think about when they think about like switching over to pads, how it'll feel like wet and moist and gross. But that hasn't really been the case for these. Like it feels like it fully like dries down, like you feel wetness for like a little bit as you're actively bleeding, it does feel like a little wet in the moment, and then within like a couple of minutes, it like perfectly dries down, which is really nice. Now, what I have noticed for the liner is that because it is a lot thinner, it is easier for these to shift around in your underwear, unlike the regular pads that definitely have a little bit more of a grip to them. These can tend to like slide around a little bit, but not that much that I would be like, okay, I need to like go to the bathroom and rearrange something. That is just something that I did notice. Now, as far as how I've been cleaning them, so what I've been doing is underneath the sink, I'll have like a little container of water and I'll soak them in there with some cold water. The first one I've been trying to be more mindful of. So, like the first pad that I use and use that water to water the plants, which they seem to have been liking quite a bit. And then for the following ones, I'll just soak them in there with some Castile soap during my flow, so during those like 5 days or so, and then wash them all in the washing machine. Now, it does say that if you wash them by hand, they will last longer. I think these last, well, I want to say like a year or so. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But they do last some time and it would last longer if you wash them by hand. But I've noticed that just sometimes I'm not able to. So I'll just put them in the washer on like a very gentle cycle and then have them either air dry or I just put them in the dryer also on like a delicate cycle. So my overall thoughts on these, I've been really enjoying them. I've been enjoying being able to notice more or have like a constant reminder that I'm on my period, which is kind of like a weird thing to say or think about. But like with the menstrual cup, you would put it in, and for those 12 hours or so, you didn't really think that you were on your period unless you are like cycle day 1 or 2, where it's like you're a little bit more achy, more cramping. But other than that, you just kind of forget about it, which for some people that is a plus. But I've noticed for me when I had to think about, okay, it's my period, it is time for me to like rest and like recharge. It is like that. I like to think of it as a built-in mechanism as a reminder that we need to rest. And sometimes I would forget about that and I would do things that I would normally do, not making that time to rest. And then it was a lot easier for me to get into burnout, fatigue, and not even realize it. But by using these pads, every time I go to the bathroom, I'm reminded, like, okay, I need to make sure that I am fostering that sense of rest, like taking it easy, even if I feel good, if I feel like I have energy, I feel like I can go and just live my day to day life. It is a good reminder that it is that built in time to rest. So I would definitely recommend these. Once again, not a sponsor. I just like them. They're freaking cute. and they have a really good sale, which makes them a little bit more affordable, especially when you want to get that first initial set. But yeah, that's my thoughts. If you've used pads before and you've used other menstrual products before, let me know down below. If you've used these pads specifically, let me know what your thoughts are down below. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll be seeing you next time.